everyone. Welcome. I'm Wesley Enoch, and I'm your host here for CIAF Conversations. Today, we're talking about an amazing new production which looks at, well, the work of Othello, but also some of the cultural connections and contexts that have been brought to bear by having Jimi Bani and his family involved in this particular work of Othello. We're joined by Jason Klarwein, who's the director and the co-creator, and Jimi Bani, who's one of the stars of the show, as well as one of the co-creators. And I just want to say g'day to both of you. And what countries are you on at the moment? Where are you from? Where are you, Jason?
I'm on Turbo Land.
Oh, okay. And what about you, Jimmy? Where are you?
Yes, same. I'm in Brisbane here, so Turbo.
Oh, are you? Oh, well, there you go.
Yes.
And I'm in Brisbane too. This is the whole thing about COVID, isn't it? We're all kind of in the same city, but we're in different rooms. So anyway, things to look forward to. Hey, just this notion too of this long collaboration that you've had. Can you just tell us a little bit about? Well, Jimmy, you maybe start. How you started working with Jason, where it came from, and why he's become this kind of trusted confidant and co-creator with you.
Yeah, sure. Look, it was a blessing to meet Jason, and you know, I think it started off with you as you
That's right. All about me.
No, I you know, from the bottom of my heart, I'd love to share this because you know, for those who are out there, like you know, I see Wesley as a mentor for myself within the theatre and within the theatre industry, and you know, Wesley, you've been telling me to tell my story for years, you know, and it was the time when we did Yip Young. That's when you started to sort of hint to me, and you were like, come on, Jimmy, you got to tell your story. And it's been you know, a sort of ongoing conversation, I guess, that we sort of had, Wes? Yeah, and you know, when you were here at Queensland Theatre Company, and you mentioned Jason. You said, you know, and I remember that conversation. You said, you know, you got to meet this fella, Jason Klarwein. He's, you know, young and up and coming, you know, really smart director, you know, visually and also loves, you know, just a great storyteller. And we had that meeting. You had that meeting with Dad and myself that morning, and we had that conversation there. And Wes, you know, once when we started meeting, you know, when I started meeting with Jason. You know, I must be honest. I was sort of a little bit sus, you know, because we're, you know, we're telling our story, and this is the first time we're gonna, you know, open up, I guess, and our conversation about the Wagadagan people, and you know, I was very protective of it, you know, as we all are, you know, with our stories, and Dad and myself was just like, no, we'll have a meeting with Jason, and Jason and Justin came up to Thursday Island and had a conversation. Jason had a yarn with Dad, and they filmed Dad and just had that conversation with Dad about Dad's vision and Dad's responsibility culturally. And that was the time when I sort of just watched Jason. I just was like, okay, I'll see how he goes, and the whole time was what he did was he just listened. You know, he just listened to Dad and let Dad have a yarn, you know, and was very interested in Dad's story and about our cultural background, and that was sort of a you know, icebreaker, I guess, for myself in starting to build that trust with Jason and be open to tell him, you know, about our story. Yeah.
It was all in terms of the research for a show that was called, well, eventually called My Name is Jimmy, which was about you and your family. How many years ago was that now? 3 or 4 years ago, I guess.
I was 5.
Yeah, 5 years ago. And so the whole process of telling that story and your dad, and I know that your dad's not with us anymore, and this incredible sense of cultural responsibility that fell on your shoulders then. How do you take it as a black fella, as a Wagadagan man? What's the kind of responsibility you have to tell these stories?
I think it's just continuing the I guess through the storytelling format, I guess, my grandfather, as you know, Wesley and Jace, the late Adi Ephraim Bani, was a linguist and cultural Torres Strait Islander ambassador, and just an incredible man. And he, before him, Ephraim Bani Sr. was a singer-songwriter, dancer, traditional dancer, storyteller, and his father before him, and my father was a singer-songwriter, and a cultural leader with the knowledge of our cultural lore that's been passed down to us. And I guess for myself, I am, a storyteller as well within the film, television, and industry, within directing and writing. And I guess just keeping that fire burning, I think within this platform, I see my responsibility, as a the next, in the Wagadagam.
Well, and I know in that particular work, and we'll talk about Othello in a second, but with My Name is Jimi, you actually had your brothers, your mother, your son on stage. Why was that important for you? Why was that an important thing?
We all can do one-man show. And there's nothing like to have them there alive. But I mean, these are two matriarchs. My mom and my grandmother, Petri Bani. All we see is my late fathers and my grandfather Adi Ephraim Bani. You hear from him all the time, and my dad, my father. You hear from him. People never hear from their foundation, their rock, and it was a blessing, when Jay said, we got to have your mom and your grandmother on stage. And I'm like, oh man, they're never in front of the camera or on stage. It's always dad and grandfather. But through that angle, it was like, wow, it was lovely to hear from them, as they are the holders of their stories, and it was, and I know Jace, you can probably add to it, but it just brought this foundation and this strength you could see from the audience, and I guess on stage too as well, where the strength came from.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I mean, this working relationship, as you say, is a good 5 years old. In many ways, it's a bit timeless too. What is it about that working relationship that you see as the most important part of making a show?
I think one of the things that struck me first, just meeting Jimmy and his family, was that there was a lot of untold stories that a lot of people didn't know. And I grew up in far north Queensland, so for me, I'm very, Jimmy, went to school in Cairns. He, his brothers, everything. So there's a whole world there that we share. But there's no correlation. There was no sharing. There's a little bit of sharing when I was at high school, but there wasn't a lot of sharing in terms of those sorts of stories. So for me, really, it was a task of going, well, how come this is so fascinating, so interesting? And particularly Jimmy's father, Dimple, and also his grandfather, the works that they were talking about and the way they talked about not just story or song or dance, but literature of Wagadagam. So that Wagadagam has its own literature that sits strongly within itself and tells us things about meteorology, it tells us things about geography, it tells us things about structures, it tells us morals, it tells us lots of different things. And that this literature was so rich and complex that basically the journey hasn't ended. I keep learning things as we go. So for me, it's sort of a bit selfish in a way, because I learn language and I learn culture and different things. But on the other hand, I think it's a really important thing for white fellas, whatever that means, but for us to meet halfway and to actually kind of go, well, what does a state theatre company audience look like? It's generally a white audience, depending on the kind of show, but generally that's what it is. And what does that audience know about the stories of far north Queensland? What do they know about Torres Strait? Pretty much nothing. So for me, it's an education process as well as an entertainment process at the same time. And for me, for Jimmy and I, Jimmy's been always saying this as well when I come to cultural questions, is that, oh, well, we walk together. That's what we do. We walk together now, and we wait, or we'll just have to wait for this to, some kind of cultural decision to be made. Generally, as Jimmy was saying in My Name is Jimmy, it was his mother, Agnes, where the cultural decision eventually lay, which was such an interesting process to watch in a room, because I'm asking Jimmy, the actor, directly saying, so are we allowed to do this? Like, how do we navigate this? And then he'll talk to the brothers, and everyone will go around, and it will go around the room until eventually everyone just turns to Mum, and she thinks about it, and then she'll go, okay, we need to ring this person, or she could answer straight away. So for me, just how knowledge is passed on and how stories passed on in a really collective way, which Wagadugum is, or particularly Jimmy's family, was really fascinating to me as a theatre practitioner.
Maybe we need a little bit more context now too. When we talk about Wagadugum, we're talking about a group of people, a family group, a clan group living in the Torres Straits. Do you just want to paint us a picture, Jimmy, of where we're talking about and what goes on culturally in that island?
Yes, so up in the Torres Straits, there are 15 to 17 inhabited islands. You've got 2 languages. You've got about 7 dialects, and you've got 5 cluster groups, as we would like to sort of put, and it's between Papua New Guinea and the tip of Queensland. And Wagadugum people are from Mabuyak Island in the near western part of Torres Straits. The Wagadugum people speak the language of the Kalalagauya, that's spoken in the western part of Torres Straits. So my bloodline comes directly from Wagadugum. That's my father's side, and on my mother's side, it comes from Erub Island, from Darnley Island in the eastern part of Torres Straits, the Peudu tribe, and so my mom obviously got married into the Bani family, and as Jason says, when the question went around, with cultural questions, and Mom would answer, and also my grandmother too as well, within our cultural law, the women get married into the family, they become that tribe, and so my mom is very, educated within the Wagadugum tribe. I was born and bred on Thursday Island, my lineage obviously comes under my late father, Dimple Bani and Ephraim Bani. That takes me back there to Wagadugum. Yeah.
And I get a sense too. I've heard you sing. I've seen you dance. That this is part of. Often there's a whole narrative that goes on about stolen generations and people not connected to culture and all of those kind of terrible things that a lot of people in the South talk about. But you grew up with all of that stuff, all of the dance, the song, the story, very intact, very strong, and being passed on in an incredible way.
Yes. Yeah. I think, it's performing is in our blood. It's ceremonies, sorry business. And Jason was talking about the values. It's a part of everyday life for us. Just to survive. That's how I grew up. It's everything we do is just to survive. I had no idea. Born and bred on Thursday Island. And I always acknowledge, Thursday Island, for the Karareg tribe, because that's where I grew up, and had no idea about, how my grandmothers and my grandfathers and my parents actually struggled. I had no idea, only because of the love that they had. We went to everybody's house. Everybody's house was open back then. Everybody's fridge was your fridge. You would, but I had no idea about the struggle that they were actually going through at that time, because there was so much love, there was so much storytelling, there was so much, teaching you about responsibility. And that was my grow up. My growing up was basically understanding what my role, when to talk and not to talk.
Yeah, you talked about before about Jason having to listen too. That's part of what we have to do is listen. We're acknowledging country and everything that we're saying here, where we come from, and I love to, you speak these names too of incredible elders who have helped you along the way, and just to acknowledge their presence in the room with us too as we have this conversation. Jason, I'm going to come to you. Shakespeare, old-fashioned, out of date, got no relevance to us today. What started this idea that this incredibly strong work of the Wagaragan, there's an amazing, powerful literature, as you call it too. Why then choose Shakespeare? Why is Shakespeare one of the touching points here?
Well, it came about because Jimmy and I happened to be in a dressing room together. We were acting in a show together. And we were just talking one day about, different roles in the theatre, or things you'd like to play in the future, or, when you grow up to be a big boy. And I said to Jimmy, look, what do you want? If there's like a classic role that you want to play that, that's not, you have to play yourself, or you're having to play a Torres Strait Islander, like, what would you like to do? And he said, I want to play Othello. And I went, oh, really? Because not many people want to do Othello. I've met a lot of actors of colour before who are like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to play that. It's that's a bit weird, and I don't quite. But Jimmy was like, no, I've always wanted to play the role. So for me, that was sort of surprising. So it got me thinking, and then I said, oh, well, let's just talk about the language, because I get really caught up in how language is structured, and I find it really fascinating. And it reminded me of when we were doing My Name is Jimmy. There's a Super 8 film, which you can see on YouTube, actually, of Ephraim Bani Jr., who was a linguist, as we were saying before. And the camera is held by Petheri, who was in the show, My Name is Jimmy, his wife at the time. And that Super 8 film is so striking because it's a man standing in front of a whiteboard. It's in black and white. And he's breaking down structurally a traditional song, which is called The Chart. And that song he breaks down not only in just like what the language means, he breaks it down into these kind of bits that, not paragraphs, but what we would call, this is a bit nerdy, but we would call like an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, right? But what really we would call a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. So some kind of thought process that is, this is the thing I'm thinking about. These are all the complexities and the oppositional forces in the middle. Then at the end, I'll come to a conclusion about what I'm thinking about, what they call a dialectic. And he was taking this traditional song, and he broke it down not into 3 parts like that, but he broke it down into 4 parts. And it was really fascinating because it was things like notice, then location, then, reason why you do these things, and then another one on the bottom. And so those 4 things, to me, I just went, how is this man breaking this down? Obviously, he studied to be a linguist, but the way the language worked to me didn't seem much different to what I would see in a Shakespeare. There were correlations. And so Jimmy and I sat there one day while we were waiting between shows, and we were looking at bits of Othello, and I was like, oh, no, that's this. And if you break down the structure, it looks like this. And Jimmy's like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I get that. So then we just started this conversation around how language works. Now, one of the things with Shakespeare is it is kind of, as you say, kind of out of date, but at the same time, it's sort of hallowed. Like it is this sort of mammoth thing that people revere. Why? And we absolutely should question why we revere it. And it is one of those passed down colonial things. So for white people, it's particularly performers, it's one of those things that you go, there's so much power in it because it's hundreds of years old, only hundreds of years old, but the language has been spoken by all those actors before you. And it means something. It resonates with people. So when you hear it, there are certain lines that you hear that have power because they are spoken by other actors before you. And there are certain techniques and tricks that have been passed generationally, not in books, but from actor to actor, about how to deal with that language. And so for me, there's not much difference between, well, there's a little bit of difference, but there's not a lot of difference between talking about that and talking about something like The Chart, which is a song of language. All the people that have sung that song before, it has a power, and when you hear it, to me, it resonates. So that singing, the literal singing of language, is so interesting to me, and so for me, that became a really cornerstone of Othello.
I get a sense too what you're saying. This idea of the literature of the thinking in Wagadagam too. This idea, the deep thought, the literature that's there, that there are similarities, parallels. And I was being a bit provocative saying Shakespeare's out of date and all those kind of things. Right. But there's a kind of sense. Well, Jimmy, I mean, what was attractive to the idea of Othello? I mean, Jason's talking about this, it being hallowed, it being respected in the kind of in the white theatre. Why was Othello interesting to you to play?
Yeah, I think when I was at Whopper there, studying at Whopper, and what got me fascinated with this classic is all of these plays that we sort of researched or read, and then being the only black fella in the class too, it got me sort of interested in like, oh yeah, I can speak this language, as an actor, it's like, okay, I can challenge myself to speak it. But as soon as when there was the play Othello comes, I'm like, what? There is a black lead, So that's what sort of attracted me at uni, and I'm like, oh, wow, oh, okay then. So I was like, every sort of I guess when we did our little assessments or monologues that we had to do, I always done the Othello monologues. And as an actor too as well, it's like, English not being my first language and having a crack at that, the Elizabethan, I guess, yeah. When I sort of really understood what he was saying, it just blew me away. Just in a sense where how this fella wrote about the elements and how this fella wrote about humanity, love, relationship. It just blew me away in a sense where I'm like, that's the culture that I grew up with, is understanding the stars, understanding when the sun goes down, and if it's really red on sunset, it's going to be hot tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having all of that kind of knowledge in there as well, I guess. I mean, it was interesting talking to some people who do a lot of translation of theatre into Japan. When they take Shakespeare, they actually put it into a different type of Japanese, obviously a very formal Japanese, but it all gets updated. It's all a kind of modern interpretation because they're moving from, well, an old English, but English into Japanese. Are we expecting that this production of Othello has that same kind of language movement? Is it translated into Wagadagam, or is it all in that old English, Shakespearean English? Jimmy, what can we expect in the language department?
Yeah, look, Jason and I just wanted to really stick to the old English.
Yeah,
that's what we really wanted to. But obviously, Jason was talking about he's interested in language in the Kalalagauya. So so we've got Kalalagauya and Yumpla talk in there too as well. And it's amazing. I mean, Jace, you can talk more on this, but it's amazing how we sort of. I'm loving it, because just to sort of talk that old English and then just jump in with the Yumpla talk, and then come back like it's, you know, we sort of have the whole English, and it's dependent to which character you're talking to. So for example, if Othello talking to the Islander characters, he breaks, you know, into Yumpla talk or Kalalagaya, when he talks to Iago, you know, and Colonel, you know, he keeps to that old English. So there is room to sort of play there. But Jason, I'll let you sort of add to that, because
yeah, well, I think that's right, because when Othello speaks to some of those, Othello's got the most poetic language in the play. He's got the big kind of what you would normally class as Shakespeare. He's got the big romantic poetry, whereas something like Iago, who's the main white character, his poetry is not very good at all. It's deliberately so, because he's a very basic kind of base sort of person, whereas Othello's mind is quite generous, as is his heart. So what's amazing, like he's saying, is like when he's talking in our version, when he's talking to sort of people who have higher status, because the play's set in 1942, than Jimmy's character Othello, he speaks in quite poetic Old English. But then even in the play, when he talks to soldiers, he's got a very common hand. And so for us, it's really easy to flip into the Creole. And actually what it does is incredible, because you've got him playing Othello playing one game with the white superiors, and then he's sort of relaxing and talking to his brothers at the same time. And it gives this great understanding. So for people who are watching it, you're going to get, but depending on your cultural background, you're going to get something different out of the show, but you're going to get you'll all get one show. But then you'll also get, if you're Torres Strait Islander, you'll get this extra like edge to it. If you're white, you'll get an extra edge to it. So it's really quite a fascinating piece in that way. He does use proper Kalalaguya language when it's needed, particularly if he's talking to elements or to ancestors, or there is quite an authoritative moment, then he speaks full language. So we've had a really good time sort of working out where the language comes, and it's been really quite natural. And also what's great is the whole cast is learning Kalalaguya. So all the white people in the room are learning language, and we have a young Torres Strait Islander woman playing Bianca who doesn't know any language. She grew up in Brisbane, and she's learning language and song and learning how to play instruments. And so that's just, for me, that's kind of just mind-blowing.
Well, Jason, you've given us a little indication too that it's set in 1942. Tell us a little bit about why is it 1942? What's that about?
Well, I think when you approach a Shakespeare, you know, there's kind of two things. You either set it somewhere or you set it nowhere. And I think it's always better if you can find more resonance in a play. Like why, like you're saying, why do Othello? Why would you do Othello? Othello has a lot of racist overtones, but they're sort of mere levers for the villainous white character to kind of try and get what he wants. It's not the only lever he pulls. He has other levers which are about sexuality, which are about being faithful, being unfaithful. So he's got all these different tactics that he uses. So it's a difficult play in a modern setting because Othello himself as a character is an outsider. He's highly revered for his warrior-like nature. He's a very, very good strategician, and he's a very good warrior in the field. So for us, that's also the history of Torres Strait Islanders, which is, you know, fierce warriors, you know, fighting between islands, all that kind of stuff. All the, you know, Kuyam and the stories of the old people are about these kind of warrior, you know, feats, just like Greece and all those places. So for me, it's so interesting. But I guess when it comes to putting it in a situation, we were very fascinated with the fathers and the grandfathers and the great-grandfathers who signed up in World War II, because the Japanese were bombing the north. Now, the Japanese had already been in the Torres Strait in part of the pearling industry. And so there was a lot of cultural sharing between Japanese and Torres Strait Islanders. But when the war happened, they went home. And then some of those people that went home helped the Japanese navigate the islands with the planes to do bombings on the top of Queensland. Now, a lot of people know that Darwin was bombed, but not a lot of people know that Horn Island, which is just off the tip, right next to Thursday Island, was bombed over 300 times.
Wow.
And that blew me away. When I heard that, I was just like, how do I not know this? How do I not know this story? So then all these men, including Jimmy's grandfathers and uncles, signed up. And actually, all of the people in the cast, their grandfathers and Torres Strait Islanders in the cast, their grandfathers and great uncles signed up too. And so for them to be playing in this show at this time is such an interesting nod, not only to traditional culture, but also to culture that has happened within the last 70 years. So there's a dance in the show which is called the World War II Plane Dance, which was choreographed in around sort of 1938, 1939, which is about Japanese bombings, and it tells the story of one of the bombing incidents that happened. That's a highly revered dance. That dance is performed in the show. And so when we perform that dance, or when we see that dance happen, that also takes us back to exactly that time. It tells us the story of what's happening. So for us, it's sort of it all became, as Jimmy likes to call it, a no-brainer in a way. There was kind of all these webs sort of started doing this thing once we started investigating the idea of a world war, because, you know, Othello needs to be in a war setting.
Yeah.
So it just became, the more we dug, the more singing the scripts did, or the more singing language did. We kind of went, oh, this is actually, it's vibrating on a level that it's physical. We can see it happen. Yeah.
And Jimmy, just that story then about World War II, I mean, just this notion of protecting country. I mean, why these men, your grandfathers and great uncles, why they would sign up to join the Australian Army at this point in time? I get a sense of protecting country, looking after country. But do you have any insight into that kind of thinking in your character then? Why they're involved in this war?
Yeah, it is that, you know, like these, I mean, every able-bodied man signed up that time, you know, and it is because of protecting the island. You know, it was only later now that, you know, there was some stories about them striking about pay rates and all of that. But when you really put that aside, they were going to fight for their land no matter what. You know, they knew that area, and just hearing stories about like these Islander men who was not only in the army as privates, and, you know, like they were leaders up there because they knew that place inside out. You know, all of that Papua New Guinean trail, you know, it was led by all them Saibai grandfathers, you know. You know, there's just amazing stories about them leading the Australian Army around. And, you know, it is a proud history of every Torres Strait Islander. And every Torres Strait Islander within this country has a connection that one of their family member was there, you know, and you know, I think for Othello, you know, it's an automatic sort of, you know, you carry that pride with you. You know, you're like, okay, I'm in the army. You know, I'm doing this, and I'm fighting for my people. And what's amazing about it is how within our story now, how Othello gets to where he is within the captain, and then all of these politics that come through. You know, with which actually happened in real life too as well. There's stories of grandfathers who went to lance corporal, you know, or you know, went higher ranking, and you know, the white Australian army members would be like, you know, trying to, hey, why is this this black fella, on top, higher ranking than me. There was all of that too, all of those sort of stories in there too as well. Yeah, and I think when we dug deeper within this, you could sort of see the racial politics, the gender politics, the all of these politics just pop up by Othello being a captain in this army. Who actually married, this white woman from.
This white woman, yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, I understand Othello to be a tragic character, even though he's kind of so empowered and so kind of in charge. In the end, he's done over, and it's quite a tragic kind of story for him. How are you dealing with that in the play? Some of these themes, as Jason was saying before, around sexuality, around the intrigue and jealousies and the undermining, and this notion of racism, really, how it manifests in the play of Othello. How are some of those themes coming through in your production?
Yeah, I think the way I sort of attack it is I don't think about stereotypical stories, that is outside of that world. I keep it as honest as possible, in a sense where he is deeply, deeply, madly in love, madly in love with this woman. And also there is that thing of, a islander man bringing a white woman back home. So within the storyline, that's what Othello thinks. That's what I think. What do my people think about this woman? How would I act? I would, so there are moments where I sort of step out and say, this is, without saying it directly, this is my woman, but in that's the sort of context, I guess, in having that. But, I think it's to really, really being honest and being deeply, madly in love with this woman, that everything happens around him. Obviously Iago goes to work, but that it's sort of like, I just try and keep it as truthful as possible, I guess, Wesley, just to sort of answer your question, I guess, just to get to that part, because
keeping the world of the play, isn't it? It's about keeping it there, but being informed by the world of, in this case, the Torres Straits and World War II.
Yes, and being surprised in every moment, and not sort of anticipate anything or telegraph, because because I think the amazing thing about that text and that language is it takes you there emotionally too as well, and really trusting that text, and so I mean, that's just to sort of answer your question, I guess, yeah.
It seems like there's a great source of pride in this story. I mean, I know too that it's almost every railway in Queensland was built by a kind of Torres Strait Islander gang as well. A crew who kind of put all the railways together, the fastest railways makers in the world at some point. And this idea of serving in World War II, pride's a big thing. Pride of your family, pride of in your community. Who's on stage with you?
So with the Torres Strait Islander actors, I've got my brothers on there too as well. I've got my brother Richard, who's playing Montano. He got the role by himself, by the way. Jason casted him. So I'm like, hey, good on you, brother. and I asked Jace if Gabriel and Conwell can be involved too as well.
These are more of your brothers, or?
Yes. My other two brothers, Gabriel and Conwell Bani. Yeah. So we got them on stage. Conwell is the holder of our songs and dances, and Gabe is also a singer-songwriter, and also I said to Jace that one thing, if we get my brothers involved, it's exactly like the experience with My Name is Jimi. It will lighten our load, especially with the cultural parts. You get people in the position who does it for a living, like Conwell teaches island dancing and sings. So we get him. He's basically looking after that side of things, along with Richard and Gabriel. And you know, that's, I think, Jace is the sort of
It's so important because then
Yeah.
Jimmy, it leaves Jimmy space so that if it was just Jimmy in the show, we would have to ask Jimmy all the cultural questions as well as he trying to do the acting, and it's not fair. It's too much cultural loading. So in terms of it having the men around him who actually hold these positions in real life, it makes it so much easier for everybody, and everybody has a role to play. And it actually comes down to some of the law of Wagadugan, which is, what roles people have. We're using those directly in a rehearsal room and directly on stage, which makes it like, Jimmy talks about keeping it honest. It makes it honest.
Yeah.
It makes it truthful in its I guess orientation or something.
Well, I guess that thing too, where, I guess you're alluding to that too, Jason, where sometimes there's just, the one black fella who has to then do everything for the whole show, be the cultural consultant and the actor, and, make sure that the community is getting engaged and all of that kind of stuff. This idea of bringing more people in means that you've actually got time as an actor there, I guess, Jimmy, to really focus on the role, but also you're building a greater understanding amongst your family. Is this show going to go back onto country? I mean, I'm just thinking about, are you going to take it up onto the Torres Strait? I mean, that would be interesting.
There is there was a little chat about it just recently, so we'll see what happens.
So where can we see it? COVID's kind of really mucked this show around a bit too. So you were planning to do it this year at CIAF.
And it will be on in a couple of weeks at CIAF. We've got 4 shows in the week of Jimmy, help me, in the week of the 8th. So so the Friday and Saturday of that week.
So it's the 12 and 13.
Thank you,
of
Jimmy.
November. Yeah.
So in Cairns. On the 12th and the 13th, even though CIAF is mostly online now, this is something you can go to. You can go to, what is it, the Cairns Art Centre or?
Bullumbajar.
Bullumbajar.
Yes. So behind the RSL near the Esplanade.
Yep.
That helps the orientation, and that great gallery there, but also there's a theatre there, and get in fast because tickets I think will sell. They're going to sell real quick because there's only 4 performances over 2 days. So,
but it's already been announced that it will play in Brisbane as well next year, which is fantastic.
Part of the Brisbane Festival, so that'll be great.
In September, so you can come and see Othello in September. In 2022 in Brisbane, or if you want to, get to Cairns and see Othello at Bullumbajar at the 12th and 13th of November. Get up there and see this work. Now, Jimmy, what it's going to be like to have your family in the audience watching this show? What do you think it's going to feel like for them?
Well, it's going to be mind blowing only because of it's a Shakespeare play, my family and whereas I have to make mention, we did say of our positions. I've got my brothers, on stage. I've also got my uncle too as well, my uncle Gabriel Bani, who is our cultural advisor, and my grandmother Petri and my mum, who's been really helping us with all the cultural questions that we have, and it'll be mind blowing because they know the cultural part, the Wagadugan part of it, and to actually see the actual whole show in that context, I think I'm really excited. I think especially in Cairns, and families come from up Torres Straits or wherever will come to watch. It's not it's not something that you will expect.
I'm sure they'll bring their talcum powder and perfume for you.
Yes,
Or you can do at the end, and when you're taking your bows, they'll do the proper kind of acknowledgement of you as well. Look, this is great about Othello. I just want to kind of shift a little bit now to talk about what the future of theatre is. We've talked about COVID having, mucked up the run of this, getting it all up and rolling and slowed it down a bit. Do you think that, let's say not just Blackfellas Theatre, but all theatre, how do we imagine that we'll get through the other side of this? Will we lose things? I'm going to ask you first, Jason. What are we going to lose along the way, and what do we have to hold on to as we go on through this COVID period?
Wow, it's a massive question. I think there are two things. I mean, the reliance on so much being at home has a double sword for audiences. They crave live performance, but also the addiction to Netflix and everything is so strong, even for me. So I just wonder how theatre will capture a broader audience in the future. And I think audiences are changing. People who go to the theatre, it's no longer a kind of, even when I go to some of the orchestra stuff, not all of it, but when the kind of audience is changing, which is great. But I wonder how we can make theatre just a little bit more community orientated and less kind of above everybody. And I just wonder how we could do that without, I guess, people who fund the arts or want to pay money for arts thinking it's lesser than or something. And to me, that might be the big question about how we go forward. Because if COVID's taught us anything, it's community, really. Because, who wants to be isolated, really? It's no good for anyone, your physical health, your mental health, any of those things. And I think people have suddenly gone, there are lots of things I have taken for granted in my life. And overworking. People overwork and forget. Come home, they've forgotten how to live life. And arts hold a great sort of center to those things, those other questions that are not about going to work, driving your car and doing all those things. I saw something today. There's a petition I heard on the ABC, which is called The Arts Are Newsworthy.
Yeah.
And I just think that's incredible. I've got to sign it up, send it to everyone I know, that actually this petition is asking that at the end of the news, when you do sport and weather, you actually have the arts there as well. And it could be, a film at Cannes, or it could be anything. So to me, that's just, I think that we've got to go down that road as a nation, I think.
Well, it's interesting at this point in time, as we're recording this, 14,000 people had signed this petition, and that the response, especially from ABC News, is saying, oh, no, we do it already, and other shows do it as well. They didn't really want to tackle this idea that the arts are important.
Yeah, that they're doing it over there. And I guess that's my point about siloing storytelling and who's allowed to see it and all that kind of thing. I think it should be for general consumption in a way. Yeah.
Jimmy, when I was talking to people in the Torres Straits, let's say last year, when lockdowns were happening and people weren't moving very far, they said every freezer was full of fish and turtle and dugong. Everyone was hunting, everyone was fishing, and the sense too that because the kids had come back from, let's say, boarding schools or whatever, there was this lot of knowledge transfer between the elders and the young people going on. Was that your experience too? Were you seeing that COVID had some positive things at that period of time?
Yeah, absolutely, Wes. It was, just spending time with your nieces and nephews. I mean, it for everything to stop still was actually a blessing in disguise for us because I heard stories from for the outer islands. When they came back from school, all the kids had to go and isolate on another neighboring island, but that was their time of camping, and all the uncles took turn and aunties took turns to camp with them, and that was their time of yarning and just connecting with them. When everything is before COVID, or it's well, now it actually is clear on how or where the gaps of passing down knowledge, the time to spend with your nieces and nephews. It's very clear. Even the responsibility as uncles. The uncles are busy. So it actually goes both ways. When we got the saying, respect your elders. Yeah, cool, awesome. We respect our elders, but then it gave the time for elders to actually reach out to our young too as well. And I think that was a blessing at that time. Well, here still today, we're having more time. I mean, I haven't spent time with my kids and my nieces and nephews for a long time, because I'm always away, obviously. But yeah.
There's a moment there. This idea too that during COVID we've used the arts to really bring people together. Jason was talking about this before, that the arts were seen as a very important thing. Do you find that by telling stories, well, what's the response from your family about telling stories, Jimmy? Like telling these stories, what do you think people get out of it from your family?
Information. There was times for answer questions, because there was a lot of questions from the nieces and nephews. They were asking about our history and their history, and it was a lot of genealogy, time for genealogy and their connection to where they come from. And a lot of time for songs and dances too as well. Like, we had time to just sit down and learn the songs, and just to quickly share too as well the importance of the songs and dances. We can say, okay, there's that song, like, is a war dance or a plain dance, but it gave time for us to understand and really know who made that song, and really know to understand what that song is saying, and also who choreographed those songs, and really give us the appreciation of these grandfathers and grandmothers who actually kept our stories alive from these songs and dances. Because it gave us time to just sit around more, and just because when there's when we have functions, especially down south, whether it's a wedding or a unveiling of a tombstone, we tend to learn the dance because it's going to happen in 3 weeks' time. There's and we dance the dance, but there's not time for sort of really understanding about the dance. So and the songs, so the arts. And I guess going back to your question was about the arts. It's in our blood, and it's everything to us. It's
Which sounds like we also need to just give it the time too. That often we're rushing, or we're doing it because we've only got the 3 weeks or whatever to do something, but to give it the time and space. And I think CIAF has really been great at that too over the last 10 years, giving space for more stories to be told. To hear the stories that often give a wonderful stage, a platform for these stories to be told as well. Jason, I'm going to come to you. Just this notion of, what do you think? What do you hope that the audience take away from this production of Othello? What are you hoping that they will take in and take away with them?
One of the main things that I always ask myself as a director when I'm watching it is, how good is the roller coaster ride that I've made? So I want it to be thrilling. And I don't really want people to think straight away. I think the best kinds of theatre is that you get a kind of you get a feeling or an uneasiness or a happiness or whatever those things are, and you take that away, and then about a week later, that feeling comes again with images from the piece that you've watched, and then you start to think about what you start to process what you've actually watched in that house. I guess for me, it's a recognition of the power of theatre, but also the power of language, and just it's kind of it's a far North Queensland story. It's our story, but we've taken, you know, this kind of English masterwork and honoured it at the same time as honouring ourselves, no matter whether we're white, black, whatever. But we've honoured our storytelling with its storytelling, and I think there's something really nice in that. It just I get satisfied by something like that.
Sounds like you breathed a powerful life into that work to make it relevant for today as well. And Jimmy, a question for you then: what do you want? What do you hope that the audience takes away from this production of Othello?
Well, you know, just to come out and really enjoy a good night of theatre. You know, I think, you know, when we toured Sapphires over to London and Shadow King, you know, you had this island boy standing outside the Globe. You know, I for those who don't know, Globe is where Shakespeare, you know, it's Shakespeare Theatre, and I've always sort of thought, you know, I'd love to tell a story that comes from here, like a, you know, long time history story, and put it in our context. And this is a great opportunity, you know, but also to bring something that people from London Globe, they watch it, or from down in Bell Shakespeare down in Sydney, or, you know, to come in, you know, and put it in front of their laps. Yeah. You know, you know, that's my sort of thing. You know, it's like if we can't go there, you know, let's bring it to our people, you know, and give them the opportunity to see great storytelling like this. Yeah. You know, and basically, you know, I just want them to come out and just be like, wow, like, because I had the opportunity to go over London, you know, and see, you know, Shakespeare plays, you know, done in that way where, you know, it's like, you know, that's what I want to share, you know, I mean, you know, if that makes sense anyway, I mean.
Oh, absolutely it does. That sense of pride in your skill and things as well. And Jimmy, you know, what's next for you? I mean, you're going to play Othello, one of the most iconic roles in the canon of Shakespeare. What are you doing after that?
Oh my gosh, it's been a crazy year in a sense where, yes, we just rehearsed Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf too as well. So I'm actually a part of that production too as well, playing George.
Another iconic role in an amazing play.
Yes, in an amazing play. I think, you know, Wesley, Othello, since back in university, you know, I always said to myself, if I can crack this role, I can play any role. You know, it's just one of those roles where I'm like, man, if I can do this role justice, you know, I can play any role. I mean, you know, I had the opportunity to play Jandamara, and, you know, with big respect to the Bunua people, and, you know, Big Eso, again, thank you for you know, giving me that opportunity, and also to the Marellen and the Mabo family, you know, thank you again for, it was such a privilege and honor to play Uncle Koiki Mabo, you know, and you know, so I think, you know, where's any opportunity, you know, I just feel like I can just have a go at any role, you know, and just to really keep that, you know, I am a storyteller, I am a tool, you know, I am a tool, a part of, you know, I am a part of this storytelling format, whether it's playing a character or whether it's playing an animal, you know.
He's going to say in a month he's going to go from Othello to playing a narcissistic cassowary called Chad.
Yes.
in a kids show that we're making together. So I was just laughing that I was going, oh yeah, he's going to go from playing Othello to a narcissistic cassowary. Hilarious.
Yeah.
And then playing George. Well, that's the life of an actor, isn't it? You play all these different roles and you talk to so many different audiences. Just this amazing thing. Just to remind the listener out there that we've been talking about the production of Othello. It's produced out with the Queensland Theatre. and it'll be part of CIAF in November 12th and 13th. Check it out on the website. But also, if you're that's in Cairns, and if you want to, you can actually come and see it in Brisbane again in September in 2022, and watch this amazing production where it's just going to, I think, blow the roof off the theatre and give us an experience of this old piece of theatre by breathing new life into it. And Jimi, I've been a great admirer of you and your work, and a great believer in you and your family for such a long time. And it's wonderful to see you just going from strength to strength and having this wonderful relationship with Jason, that you play off each other and you work your magic together. So I think just big eso to you, and just big love, because I think that's what it's all about. Folks, you've been listening to CIAF Conversations with Jason Klarwein and Jimi Bani, and we're talking about Othello that you can see at CIAF. Check the website out. We've actually got a couple of other talks on as well. Check out the website if you want to talk. We're talking about treaty and sovereignty, and we're also talking about the role of tourism in what we're doing, especially arts and culture. From a blackfellas perspective. So many things to get in touch with CIAF, remembering that it's all online this year, except you can actually go and see Othello live on stage and see Jimi Bani up there playing Othello. Hey, Jason and Jimi, thank you so much. That's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for this talk.
Eso.
Well, big eso is.
Marvelous.